Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Crime and Entertainment. I have here today a very special guest. I heard his podcast that he done with another content creator, Jeff Nadeau. So shout out to Jeff Nadeau. Please welcome to the show, Frank Meeink. Frank, how are you, my friend?
Good. Thank you for having me, man. Thanks for asking me to come on.
So if people don't know, and we cover all types of people on this channel, we've had everybody from mobsters to porn stars to wrongfully convicted to movie stars. So all across the board. Uh, and you've got a very interesting story, and you have a book also that we'll plug towards the end of the show. But give our audience like a little 2 minute primer of Jeff Meeink, and then we'll kind of start from the beginning and work our way forward.
All right. So, 2 minutes. Okay. You grew up in Philly. My parents were young little drug addict alcoholics who got together and then split up. And I lived with my mom mostly growing up, and then had to go back to my dad's. My mom's neighborhood was in like a rough Irish kind of neighborhood, where we didn't like anyone else, and it was, and my dad lived up in a mixed, mostly still a little bit Irish, but white and mostly black neighborhood up in Southwest Philly. And anyway, I wound up moving in with him. Went to an all black school. Got in a lot of fist fights, just a lot of trouble. I also had some friends at the school, but I only cared about the people that were causing me trouble. And then that summer, I got into this gang called the Neo Nazis that my cousin was kind of part of, and the way I was feeling about race that summer was just like, maybe to say, the perfect storm.
Mm-hmm.
Wound up getting very involved in this movement. Traveled all around the country, lived in safe houses. I mean, you name it. Did TV shows for the movement. I mean, recruited all over the place. Yeah, it's very, very active. And then went to prison for a while. Kidnapped somebody, went to prison, got out, and from there started to change a little bit of my beliefs. I was 19. I've convicted. I'm already have a felony conviction on life for life on my record. I'm only 19, which I should have. I did some horrible shit, and that's just some of the stuff I got caught for. You know what I mean? So,
Right.
Pretty brutal human being, very ego driven. Um, you know, so one of the things when people say, well, how did you wind up joining these groups? And I'll tell you, man, it was, man, I was full of fear, I was full of fear. And when I seen people fear them, the neo-Nazis I was hanging with, I seen that fear, man, I wanted that, you know? So, I mean, I just, I feared everything, man. I feared my parents. I feared my step parents. My stepfather was abusive. I mean, I feared man, I feared everything. I feared my school. I feared if I was going to have enough food to eat some days, you know? So that was all very attractive to me to get into that. So, but that's a quick synopsis. And I wound up getting out, just to get you up to pace. I got out of that stuff for about 19 years. I was a civil rights activist. Did all types of stuff, helped build programs to get people out of the neo-Nazi world. I also, built hockey programs and won national championships, and built radio stations and radio shows. And I had an ESPN radio show for a year on hockey. I mean, it's just kind of the thing I do. So, but also, when I was a neo-Nazi, I was very into alcohol because there was no drugs allowed. And then as I got out of the neo-Nazis, I became a drug addict, which was like par for the course where I lived, whatever, no excuses, just a product of my environment. And got very heavily into drugs and alcohol, and tried to get sober and relapse, and did that for 25 years. And right now, got 4 years, coming up on 4 years right now, work an amazing program with an amazing person who, my kind of like my recovering rabbi, and have been living a really, really good life of service to others in the last 4 years. It's really been pounded home. So,
Well, congratulations on your sobriety, man. I know those things are not easy to overcome, and that gives the audience a little bit of your background. And I'm really going to enjoy this interview, man, because I love a success story where somebody can reach bottom and climb their way back out. And that's what, a lot of the people that we have on the show, even if they have been, done some things in their life that they're not proud of, that's kind of the tone of the show, is they can rebuild. They can climb back out of whatever hole they get themselves in. But I wanted to touch on something really quick before we start from the beginning. There's something you said, and I've heard you say it in some other interviews. When you seen people fear those types of groups, that was an addiction to you, like that made you, okay, well, if I'm part of them, then I'll be feared. I can see where that would be addicting, especially to someone that had been in fear before, like you explained. So I get what you're saying, that's quite an addiction, and then that can just be a fuel, because I mean, it's just like anybody, when you join a faction like that, be it the mob or La M or whatever the case may be,
Right.
That comes with a certain fear level, that when you walk into a place and they know who you are, like, people look up, they get out of your way, they move, like, it's a respect that otherwise you wouldn't have. And that becomes addicting, just like a drug would.
Yeah, absolutely. And it gives you purpose and meaning. And, and then on top of that, just real quick, when you're able to do, because racism to me is the biggest bait and switch, right? I would find a guy who would say, man, I just want to be proud to be white. I can't be proud to be white without being called a racist. We all hear it, right? And then you'd be like, black people be proud to be black, but I can't be proud to be white. And I'm like, yeah, man, that's exactly what we're talking about. That's what my group's all about. Come join. And then when you come join our group, we never talk about our heritage. We always talk about everyone else's heritage and look at what they're doing and look at what they're doing. We don't talk about, so you're like, oh, I want to be proud of my heritage, my white heritage, but we just talk about how everyone else. And if you're in any type of group where your group gets together and your biggest conversation is against somebody else, that's when you have to look at some things, you know what I mean? So,
right.
Anyway.
So you detailed coming up, you grew up in Philadelphia?
Yes.
So was that a rough part of Philly where you come up?
My mom's neighborhood wasn't as rough. I mean, it was still rough. I mean, it was a neighborhood you had to know how to fight. You know, it was. Yeah. Guys got murdered at the bar down the street. One of my cousin's best friends, and there's a bunch of violence. Yeah, a lot of violence. More than average. But I wouldn't say it was like the hood. My dad's neighborhood now. No, that was what Fresh Prince sings about, West Philly, born and raised on the playground, and he goes, a couple of guys up to no good, started making trouble in my neighborhood. Well, he moved out of that neighborhood and I moved into that neighborhood, and I'm not joking, man. I mean, we lived right across the street from the house. I mean, diagonally across the street from the housing projects. I mean, that's where my dad lived. You know what I mean? So anyway.
I'm assuming there was a family split, mom split from dad early on, or?
Yeah, early on. Like I remember a little bit of the apartment that they shared together, just for whatever reason. I have some scarce memories of that apartment, but I don't ever remember them being together. So never really seen it. So
what was the racial dynamic like with you coming up? I mean, with that, I feel like there's either one or two ways that can go. They're going to know that, you're a cool white boy and you're going to be accepted, or they're going to sniff out fear and, you'll be attacked. What was the dynamic like?
So, yeah. So when I got there, I got in two fights right away, and handled my business. For whatever reason, I handled, I got the good punching. Then I got jumped a couple times after that because no one wanted to fight me fair.
Right.
But then I played baseball. And when I started playing baseball, I was like the first white kid to make the team. I was like the reverse Jackie Robinson, right? I was the first white kid to make it back on this baseball team. And we won a championship. And those guys, and that's what I always think about, because for some reason, I always thought about the bad times at that school and the fear. Like, there were guys on that team that I was pretty cool with, you know what I mean? And yeah. So, but it wasn't so much just at the school. This Pepper Middle School, which has now been closed, by the way, because of the whatever, it wasn't run right. And but anyway, it was right next to Bartram, which is a big high school in Philly, the Bartram Freshman Center. So there was a high school just for the freshmen for the school, and that was right next to our school. So those are all kids that are a little bit older. They got out. They went to class after we went to class, and they got out before we got out of class. So they would, I mean, they were right next door. So they just would come around and hover around our school, you know, and those kids don't know me. They just see a white kid who has to cut through. So you know, you just hear a lot of shit, man, you know, just, and, and sometimes I wasn't good at keeping my mouth shut, you know, just sometimes, but I was always fast. And that's one thing that's always saved me. That's all throughout my story, man. I'm like unbelievably fast. Like I was one of those white kids that just could go, boy. I'm super bow legged, you know, not very sexy legs, but super bow legged and like a spring. So was always unbelievably fast. So
You needed them, they work. They work for you to
yeah,
your benefit.
yeah, yeah.
So you actually say that it's your cousin that kind of introduced you into this whole world of the neo-Nazism?
Yeah, man. And he was, you know, he wasn't much older than me, man. So he wasn't like this, he wasn't like a recruiter or, you know, he was just a guy who joined this group um in his school because he lived out in the farm country, you know what I mean? So this was kind of okay, acceptable in that area.
Mhm.
Um, Meaning that like there would be no neo-Nazis roaming my middle school, you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
So and he was just part of this group, and they were all punk rockers the year before, and now they'd all changed. So I really thought they were cool when they were punk rockers. So that summer I couldn't wait to go hang out with them guys again. I thought they were super cool. When I hung out with them the year before, I went up there because every summer I would go up and spend time with my cousin up there. Um, and so this they were just all neo Nazis, and you know, I hear him say things, and I would just hear him talk about things where I would talk about like multiracial society don't work, right? I don't I don't really know what that meant back then. But once you start talking about blacks and whites not getting along, I'm like, oh wait, let me tell you, you know.
Yeah.
And my cousin, that was like the only time I would ever hear my cousin, because my cousin's kind of a real ball buster. He always has been. But it was one of the only times I ever heard him talk like almost proud of me in a way, or not proud of me, but he would say to him, he's like, "Yo, my cousin lives in like a really rough neighborhood," and so you know, and so they would always be like, what's it like?" And I would tell them, I'm like, "Yeah, we live right across the street from the projects," and they would say, "Yeah, see, that's what it's going to be like. It's all America is going to be like that someday," and you know, and you're like, "Oh my God, you know, that's scary. That's scary shit." So
And so did that message at the time kind of resonate with you? Were you at that time, were you kind of on the same page and that was a lot of what appealed to you?
absolutely, and it was the other things, man. It was like an uncle would say when I was growing up. I remember him saying something about he came home from the store, and when he came home from the store, the guy gave him the wrong change and ripped him off. And he was like, "Yeah, you know, Johnny, you know, always trying to Jew somebody, you know." And I remember everybody laughed. "Oh yeah, Johnny's a Jew." Da, 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 da. Or you know, how do you start a Jewish parade? You roll a penny down the street. You know, they all pick up pennies, and everyone laughed. And I remember asking my uncle one time, like, what do they mean by that? Like, why is that funny?" And my uncle at the time, remember, he's a good guy. I mean, he's not like some anti-Semitic racist dude. This was just neighborhood stuff. You know what I mean? I mean, really, and he started to tell me, he said, "Well, see, Frank, the Jews are notorious for money." And he's like, you know what? He stopped himself and he goes, "You know what? You'll get that joke when you're older. When you're older, you'll get the joke. It's pretty funny." Well, when I was at my first neo-Nazi rally, I heard this neo-Nazi this minister guy, whatever he wanted to call himself, but whatever. He was preaching out of the Bible, you know, how to hate Jews out of the Bible. But then I remember them talking about like how the Jews are secretly siphoning money off the Federal Reserve to send to Israel. And when they would say things like that, I would go, "Oh, it's like my uncle's joke. Like, oh, I must be older now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I got the joke. I must be older." And so a lot of that type of stuff was happening to me.
Okay. At what part did it like, cause I don't know the initiation process getting into something like that. Is there initiation? Do you just tell them you have interest and you want to join in? Like, what is kind of the steps to become part of this particular organization?
Yeah. So, you know, for me, it wasn't like you don't get jumped in and I never did that later on. It wasn't nothing like that. It wasn't like getting jumped in or, um, basically, you know what I mean? If you had the beliefs we had and you were white, you were in, you know, like we let you in. To what degree we let you in on things is depends on who you were and what you did, you know. Um, so like the night I got in was that just we there was a concert. They all went to the concert. There was a bunch of neo Nazis I didn't know that my cousin knew them, you know, and I didn't know a lot of them. And they were all at this concert together and drinking and fighting. And after the concert, they said they were all going to like some party afterwards, and that I was, you know, obviously my cousin was going, so I was welcome to go. And I was like the only non-shaved head in the group. I had a little skater haircut. And I'm a little short little guy. And when we get in there, this one guy just slapped me in my head and said, "Yo, when you gonna shave this stuff off?" You know, and it's all really took. I was like, "I do it now. Like, you know, I do it right now." And he was like, "All right." And I asked my cousin. You know, I was 14. I think my cousin was 15, going on 16. So he's responsible for me. And but anyway, and then they shaved my head, man. And as they shaved my head, they would say like "White Power" or "Sig Heil." You know, that's, you know, do something like that. And man, you know, white, you know, whatever. And I felt good, man.
Well, you mentioned there's something I wanted to touch on. You said responsible for you. So is that a thing where, like, if you bring somebody in that you kind of vouch for, like he's bringing you in, you're his older cousin. If for some reason things didn't work out or something went wrong with you, is he held accountable? Is it that type of situation? Because we haven't covered a lot of, this
Yeah.
show. So
No, I mean, you know, no, they wouldn't hold my cousin accountable because I mean he did his own little thing, and you know, um to no, I mean, and I had other cousins that were involved too that were, you know, I don't want to, they're pretty crazy, and
right.
they were also involved in this movement too. So there's a bunch of cousins. So there would be no repercussions on the family because there's a bunch of guys that were still active in the movement for a long time. You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm. Okay. So how long did it take for you to kind of start rising up the ranks?
um, you know, I'm one of those type of people, man. You know what I mean? When I'm doing something, I want to get other people involved. I mean, you know, if I want to coach a hockey program, I started doing it. If I want to, I'm one of those guys. I mean, it's a gift from God, you know, whatever you want to call it. And so, right away, man, right when I got my head shaved, I had to spend probably another month up with the guys up in the Lancaster area. It wasn't really in Lancaster, but whatever. It's the Lancaster area. Um, when I went back to Philly, I had to go back to my neighborhoods because I had to move back to my dad's, right? Now there's a bunch of white kids that live up in that area who are a bunch of skateboarder and punk rock kids that I was kind of cool with anyway. And so I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go get these guys involved. And so the day I moved down back to my dad's, no lie, I'm walking over and there's a bunch of like just punk, you know, skater kids and punk rock kids hanging out. My cousin, one of my cousins, another different cousin, happened to be staying out from a big Irish Catholic family. Um, anyhow, I go over and he introduced me to another guy who just was becoming a neo-Nazi. Like he was doing it on his own. And I was like, yo, I was just up in the woods for, you know, the last 6 weeks learning all this stuff. You know, I was like, you know, so I started telling him about stuff that I learned, and then me and him became friends, and we just started recruiting like all the skateboarder kids, and then we started recruiting the other white kids that played basketball down there because, you know, we needed, you know, because you know the black kids were coming on the basketball court some days. I mean, it's just like American History X, but it really was like that. Like we, you know, and so we just started recruiting, and then it was really, and it was always easy too in my mom and my dad's neighborhood, because then I went down to my mom's neighborhood, which was 100 times easier because it was already all Irish kids who were proud to be Irish, and they were already tough neighborhood kids who all had each other's back. So, so that was, and it was real easy. It was like, yeah, you want to be proud to be Irish? Come join my group. That's what we're all about, you know. And
Well, you
you
touched
know,
on
and
that
we're
there, and I'll bring it up really quick. It's said that American History X, which I'm sure a lot of people have seen, it's a great film, is loosely based on you. But I've heard you say in the past that maybe not necessarily directly, as in they didn't sit down, get your story, and cut you a check for helping. It was kind of a hodgepodge between you and another individual, and then out came this movie. But as I've listened to you tell your story on other interviews, and even what you're telling me here today, there's a lot of similarities, too much to
mm-hmm,
ignore. Um,
mm-hmm.
First, I guess, have you seen the film?
Oh yeah, I've seen the film. I've seen the film many times. So
Yeah, I mean, what do you think?
I mean, I think they did a great job at making that movie. I think they did a great job on the dialect with in between white nationalists talking to each other. I think they did a great job. Is it my story? I could tell you that I know they were talking to a couple other former neo-Nazis who were out at the time.
Mhm.
Um, I know for a fact that we're talking with them, and those guys knew my story. And so when they got how you know these guys say that they never heard my story is a little strange, but whatever. Um, the way I have to look at it today is and I will tell everyone it's not my movie. It's I have but it definitely has some coincidence that make a lot of people say, you know. But on top of that, man, it's God's movie now. Like that's the way I gotta look at this. Like they put it out there, it's done, it's done its job. For whatever reason, my name being tagged back to this movie for whatever keeps my activism alive because that's what
Mhm.
I use it for. You know what I mean? I don't use it for glory or fame. Like people say, oh, yeah, and whenever I say, oh, I heard that movie's about you, I always go, it's not about me, but it's I really lived that life is the best thing I can say. Like I really, really lived that life. My book, if you read my book, and I don't try to pimp my book, but we talk about at the end how we like fact checked everything
Yeah.
just because the story's so crazy. And my story again was years before American History X. My story happens in '95 when I'm changing and doing all these things and telling my story publicly for the Anti-Defamation League and going all around the country and speaking and with no book, no nothing, just was going around the country all 95, 96, 97, all going around the country speaking in newspapers all the time, whatever, ego stuff. But um so I got very active in being against the white supremacist movement.
Well, it was definitely a great film. I mean, that I read a lot of the trivia and the show notes and stuff on there, and like so many things could have been, should have been on that movie. I think Joaquin Phoenix was actually offered the role of Edward
Yeah.
Norton originally. He turned it down. Marlon Brando, I think, was in talks to play Cam in the beginning, but I think a lot of people were reluctant to touch it because of the subject matter. But I
Hmm.
think now I can't imagine anyone else, even down to Fairuza Balk in the role she played as Derek's girlfriend. I
Yeah.
can't imagine anyone else in any of those roles. They just nailed it. Even Ethan Suplee, who's totally had a body transformation since then. Anybody sees that movie and
Yeah.
sees him on Instagram now, he's like a damn cut up machine. But I mean, excellent movie. But I
And
know
I have another one. Sorry to interrupt.
no,
So
go ahead.
and right now I have my book along with all the other activism. Hopefully we'll get into more of that. But
Yeah.
um, with all that going on, a movie script has been written. It's written. It's already being out there. So hopefully there's another real of the real story or a real one's coming out. So it was a lot of work, and so it's out there though. So
Well, I'm definitely hope that comes to fruition because we've had a lot of people on the show before that, you know, it's amazing how many liberties Hollywood takes. And I know they have to put their spin on it to sell it. So I understand it to a degree, but as a person the movie is about them, I'm sure you want it as close to being home as possible. So hopefully that
yeah,
can, land for you. And we're definitely going to get into the activism. And I'm sorry I got off topic, but you mentioned American
no,
History X. So I figured I had to hop on it. Just to
yeah,
kind of give some context. So if people didn't know that this was movie, was loosely, I'll put it like that, based on you. So
yeah.
you're getting into it. You're rising up the ranks. You mentioned earlier that you were starting like a TV show. Tell me a little bit about that and what that was.
Yeah, so I used to have a show. It was in Springfield, Illinois. It was called The Reich, and it was a cable access television show. Like this is back like a Wayne's World. We were like a racist Wayne's World.
Wow.
And so we go on there and they have to give it to you. Like they're not allowed to say no because it's freedom of speech. So this cable access company is actually run by like a liberal college. That's where they do the filming for the TV shows and for cable access at the time. And we have to go down there and like they reluctantly like agreed. And so they let us do, we did 2 episodes. In fact, I was arrested for the kidnapping at the next tape. I was at the TV station waiting to walk in to go do the next taping of my TV show and they arrested me. So
Dang.
anyway, um, so yeah, man, we went on there and we were like kind of entertaining. Like would, we didn't just do like what because there was other racist TV shows out at the time, and one called Race for Reason, and I forget what the other one was called. I think it might have just been like a war or something, but whatever. They had their own cable access shows out, so when I was watching them, and man, they were just so boring. It was just like these older white supremacists talking to other older white supremacists about the beliefs, you know. And I was like, man, I believe what you guys believe, but I want to put a bullet in my head. I mean, it was just so it was so boring. And I was like, I'm not going to do a show like that. We're going to do one that's fun. And we had like little skits, and we had like a band. Like, yeah, dude, like we did this whole big thing. It was fucking crazy. And it was on TV and now we've never been able to find any of the episodes. It was on cable, but there was newspaper articles written about the TV show.
I can
So,
imagine.
yeah, so anyone can research, it was in 1994, 1993, 1994. Yeah.
What was the name of it?
It was called The Reich.
Oh, the right. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I was doing that. Yeah, that was that was when I was 17. That's what I was doing. 16, 17.
Now, like other people that we've talked to that's been in either motorcycle gangs or the mob, they don't necessarily have day jobs. Like they live and they make money in whatever means necessary to benefit their organization, whatever that may be. Did you guys
Hmm.
have like regular jobs? Did you, did you pull jobs or scam? I mean, what's that part of the life like? I was always curious. Did you like
Yeah.
regular life, but then you got together because you had a common belief system?
So so yeah, there's just two tiers to that. A lot of the guys, man, everyone just worked. Like, I mean, there were guys who just had normal jobs, and then on the weekends came and hung out, and came to functions. And again, when I was in the neo-Nazis, it was pre-internet, so it was still like you had to come meet, you had to come do things, you had to like be social with each other, whatever you could. And I was always good at getting people like to come to do things, like go watch a hockey game or something. Like I don't know, just always into doing shit like that, and making fun events. I was an event planner for the neo Nazis. Um, but
Whereas before you got there, it may have been harder to get guys together, but someone like you that's got charisma and can pump in some excitement to it and get people wanting to come to those types of things, I would imagine that you were, looked at and sought after to be put in that role.
yeah, I think so. Yeah, and it's funny, man. It's none of my doing. That's like it's just some like natural shit that God gave me that I was always able to do that. So,
Um,
um,
at what
okay.
point did you get your famous tattoo on your neck there? It's actually on the cover of your book, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I got that. It's a circle swastika with a Celtic cross through the middle. It
Mm-hmm.
was the image of a group called White Combat, um, which was like a kind of inner circle
Mm-hmm.
group of the neo Nazis at the time. Because where I was coming up in Pennsylvania, we were like the leading hate state in America. Like no, like it was Pennsylvania, not Alabama or not Florida. It was Pennsylvania, and I was happened to be a part of that growth that years. Um, so anyway, I got this tattoo. It symbolized like I was in the inner circle. Um, and that tattoo was hell, man. Like not just getting it, not like that. It was just when you get out of the movement and you have a swastika on your neck,
Yeah,
you know
it's
what I mean?
kind
Like,
of hard to be accepted after that.
yeah, yeah. So,
But I would
when you go
imagine
out,
that was how deep you were into it at the time when you got it.
oh, dude, I mean, like that's what people don't understand, man. When I talk about being radicalized, I was I was radicalized, man. If they would have said, Frank, here's the keys to a truck that would go take it to a federal building, dude, I would have said okay. Like no doubt. Like that's where, and
That's
there's
where you were at.
people, yeah, man. Yeah. I was there. Like
Wow.
I really thought I was a soldier for the white race, and I was just trying to save the future of the white race, and and it was really all inside stuff, really, though. I mean, it comes down to it, was like I was just a scared
Well,
person.
that's
But
that's kind of what I was going to ask. Do you credit any one particular person that may have been in any kind of leadership position in there to help guiding you, or was your own belief system more or less what was guiding you to that? Because in the movie, Derek kind of has that Cameron, I forgot his last name, but Cameron kind of guiding him, played by Stacy Keach. Was there somebody like that for you that you later on kind of realized they were just using you, or was your own belief system and your childhood kind of your driving force?
yeah, I mean, there was definitely leaders. I don't know if yeah, yeah, like I there were leaders up there, but I wouldn't say like I truly ever like had like a deep respect for any of them. Like I kind of seen them all. Growing up in Philly, I kind of, now like hanging up in the woods with these dudes from, in Pennsylvania, and like, I mean, up in the woods. Um, I mean, I've seen a con man myself, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not, I just seen that they were just, whatever, I don't know, for a reason, there wasn't a lot of respect given. I know that. And I was kind of a shitty person at the time. Anyway, I had such an arrogance and ego about me. Um, and alcoholism was out through the roof. And throughout my whole 15, 16 years, when I was only 15 or 16, I was full blown alcoholic in that movement. But
Oh,
anyway,
that
so
early.
there was some, yeah, I was full blown alcoholic the whole time. And then that's not to put blame on the alcohol. That's why I did the stupid shit. It goes par for the course with each other, if you know what
Right.
I mean. So,
And I'm not sure if it was on your tattoo or not, but isn't there some sort of symbolism if that swastika is going counterclockwise? That's a symbolism of leadership, or is that something that I misread?
no, I've never heard that. Yeah, no, a lot of the original ones were on the side that I know of. So, but I don't know.
It said if it was going counterclockwise, then it's a symbol of
Oh,
leadership. If it's clockwise, then it's, I guess, a follower, I guess you would say.
yeah, I never heard that. I never heard that.
Hmm.
Yeah,
I read that and I wasn't sure if it was true. So I figured I'd throw that in there.
yeah, I never heard that. I never heard that.
So you mentioned you did get arrested, and this was a situation where you guys committed a crime, but there wasn't a lot you could do in lieu of maybe trying to get out of it because you guys videotaped it.
Yeah, yeah, I wasn't the smartest cookie. Not the smartest cookie. No, I got to be honest.
So
But
tell
I
us a little
didn't.
bit about that.
Yeah, man. So in the white supremacist world, one of our biggest enemies is what people call Antifa, right? The Antifa movement, or ideology, whatever you want to call it. And so we used to fight with them all the time, like all around the country. Like that was like, there was clubs that they would have, and we had our own clubs, and we battled, and there's been murders between us and bodies, and it's just been a crazy, crazy thing. So anyway, one of these guys, these Antifa type guys, was in Springfield, and some of my buddies who I had now recruited like 20 kids out of like these two different high schools, like because I was there for 2 months and was just recruiting, and that's why I was getting the TV show, because I was recruiting. So all these new fresh cuts, like new fresh guys, but they're all friends. Not all of them, but some of them were friends with this anti-fascist kid, and I became cool with them too, and did some illegal dealings here and there with them, whatever, stolen goods or some shit. Um, but I never liked the kid, man, because he just was. I didn't want him infesting any of my newcomers, the new recruits that hey, that you don't have to be a neo-Nazi. You can, that's their whole thing. So, well, it was to me. So anyhow, I got sick of him being around, and I got sick of my friends kind of having his back. And I said, all right, well, I'm kind of the leader here. So I called them up and told them to come over to my place. It was, I think, Christmas Eve night. And he came over, like, and it might have been the day before Christmas Eve, whatever. It's in that time. And he came over, and it was a setup. We were waiting there with guns, and, uh, kidnapped them, and tried to hold them for ransom, but there was no ransom to get. And just tortured the guy for hours on videotape. And that's when we started videotaping the torture, because I wanted to show all the, again, I'm sick. So I'm sick in my head. Um, I want to show all my new recruits, like, that guy you think is cool ain't cool. You know what I mean? Like, he ain't cool. I ain't down with you guys kind of, maybe getting influenced by him. Like, that's how sick I was.
So your
So
thought process was to use that tape to show the new recruits.
yeah. So they, stop thinking it was cool. So we let him go on I think it was Christmas morning, right around that time, and he had to go to the hospital because he had like he was pretty dinged up, and so when he went to the hospital, obviously he told them what happened. The police in this town of Springfield, Illinois, which is the capital. It's big time, and want to be big time. They know, like they've heard this new guy coming around who has a TV show who's recruiting outside of high schools for neo-Nazi stuff. They know I'm not a local, and they know I'm kind of just starting trouble. You know what I mean? And so they're, I remember at the time when they arrested me, man, I thought it was because of my freedom of speech, and I was like, no, I was a criminal. That's why they arrested me, right? But when you're in, like, you're political criminal. You're like, no, dude, you're just a fucking criminal. Anyway, they arrest me, and yeah, man, that was it.
So
Yeah,
how
that was
long
my
before
story.
that, when you let them go, how long before the cops come to pick you up?
No, they didn't. Well, we right when we let him go, um, we had heard that he had gone to the cops, and then we'd also heard that a kid that we thought was being an informant, that he had also told on us already. So anyway, we took off, and I went and I hid out in Kansas City at some safe house. Me and one of my buddies, we went and hid out in safe house in Kansas City for like, I don't know, maybe a month. It was rough. It was rough. That was a rough trip. Rough trip. Um, but anyway, I had a girlfriend back in Springfield, and I went to go see her, and I did the next taping of my TV show. So I snuck back into town, see my girl, and went to go do the next taping of the TV show. And that's when they arrested me.
So they were there sitting on it.
Yeah. So it was probably about a month and a half after the kidnapping that they got me.
Okay.
And I know I had a warrant for my arrest. I knew that. So.
What are they charging you with?
Aggravated kidnapping or aggravated unlawful restraint. And they also had a burglary on there, was the first charge, which I had nothing to do with that burglary. It was something that was between whatever, the co-defendant and the other guy that we kidnapped. They had done something together or whatever. Doesn't matter. It was a long time ago. But so then they dropped that from me right away because I didn't do it. And then yeah, wound up had a bunch of little smaller charges, and but they wound up just charging me my final charge, and what I pled guilty to and what I owned up to was aggravated unlawful restraint.
Okay. So a
So
little bit better than kidnapping.
yeah, like right at the bottom of it. Only because he came to my place of residence, and
Right.
if
Had
I
you
would have went
took
to
him
his place,
somewhere else
yeah,
against his will, then that's a whole nother ball game. What's your
yeah.
living situation like? Do you have a hired attorney?
No, oh my gosh, no. I had a public defender.
Really?
No,
So,
I had a
so
public.
the, I don't know what you would call them. I've heard the term the league, but like that movement wasn't able to come up with an attorney for you.
No, 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 no.
Wow.
Yeah, nope. That was not.
But with a public defender, I'm shocked you got that. To be quite honest.
Yeah, well, I always tell people, like, when you go to the county jail and everyone finds God in the county jail, it's because they have a public defender and they need God. So,
Yeah, I've heard some horror stories in there about what.
but my public defender did me good, man. He got me a 3 to 5 year bit on that kid. So he did me what he did. I mean, I wanted probation. That's what I
Yeah.
wanted, of course. I was going to be a good boy if you put me on probation. I promise this time.
Right.
This time I'm not. And yeah, why don't just give me a 3 year bit? So.
Well, I mean, and you catch some good ones that can do some things in there. It's hard for a man, to all due respect, their workload and the amount of cases that they have. A lot of time they just look to get you the best deal they can and then keep trucking. They're not like a paid lawyer. They don't have all the things at their disposal to help fight it and bring in expert witnesses and things like that to really prolong a case. And so they do the best they can. And it sounds like you got a decent one. So
Yeah.
going in like this, you're going in with a pretty known status of what you've done. You've kidnapped a rival, and tortured, and that's, as crazy as it sounds, that's walking in the door with a little bit of clout, in a place like that. How did that transfer in there? How did it carry over? And what was the landscape like when you walked in? Did they know who you were?
Yeah. So yes, not. I hope anyone listening to this don't take it as I sound egotistical. I'm just stating facts. Is that because I had that TV show, when I was in the county jail and after I pled guilty and I knew I had to go upstate, I started getting letters from the upstate prison, and then when I got in the intake, I was getting what they call kites.
Mm-hmm.
Kites are
Messages from inmates. Yeah.
yeah. I started getting these kites like right away in the county jail. And then also when I got up to intake at upstate, which was like three of the biggest white gangs were all like, yo, we know you're here. If you need anything, we're cool. Blah, 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 nice to meet you, brother, whatever. And dude, I was getting anything I needed. Like when I first got there, just got whatever I needed. I didn't have to want for shampoo, so all the take care stuff, man. I didn't have to do any of that, man. It was like, and I started smoking weed in prison because I didn't smoke weed up until then because I was very anti-drugs. But when I was in prison, I was like, come on.
Pass the time.
So yeah. But because of the bikers, one of the gangs, the biker white gang, I was very, very cool. Yeah, some of those dudes. So, and that was their deal.
Who was kind of some of the bigger organizations in the first prison that you went to?
There was one gang called the Northsiders, which is a big Chicago white gang in prison. There was then there's one just called the Bikers. Like that's just the name of the. They're just because once they're in there, they have no flag colors. You know what I mean? They're basically all run together. So there's Bikers. And then we had our AB and AN, Aryan Brotherhood and Aryan Nations guys. Mm-hmm. So that was.
Okay.
So yeah.
So did you decide to click up, or did you just kind of play your hand whenever it was beneficial?
Yeah, played my hand when it was beneficial. I didn't have to. That's the one thing, was specifically told, especially by one of the AB guys in there, is that I don't need to initiate in. I don't need to do anything. Like, I came in preaching this stuff on the outside. Like, it wasn't like I got into prison. It was like, yo, I'm outnumbered. I need to join. Like, so they knew all that. So I had no, and even though again, this is prison life. Take the story for what it is. I didn't have to initiate in to anywhere. But when you're in intake is also when they bring the child pedophile and they have to go through intake with us. They can't get to protective custody yet because as soon as they are done with intake, they're going to refuse housing and they're going to go to protective custody, right? But while they're there for the 2 weeks in intake, they go to commissary and they buy up all the commissary because once you're in protective custody, you have restrictions on your commissary. So we know that. And so every young guy coming up and you're in intake, you're going to have to hit one of those guys. Like there's no, like that's what you're older. Even if you're already a member and you're just a well-run, gangster disciple, vice lord, whatever, the job was you're going to hit that guy before he goes into protective custody and hopefully potentially rob him. And that's what we did, and I still took part in that. I was 17. The other young gangsters in my cell in the intake cell block were going to, do some hits that they had to do. And I was like, that's just where my brain was at the time. Again.
Well, if somebody's got to get it, I would say those would be a good candidate for it.
Yeah. And and I try to be as spiritual today as possible and know that everyone's a child of God and, but there are still people that, you know what I mean? I got to live my life. So,
right.
Yeah.
And that's word travels, quickly once you get in there. And it was funny. I had a guy on the other day that was one of the world's top like cyber criminals. And so he was in there for fraud. And he's like, what I didn't know when I got arrested was when a white kind of, I ain't gonna say nerdy, but a middle-aged white guy comes in there and says he's in there for fraud. That's kind of AKA you're in there as a choma. And he was like, but he had to tell him he was legit in there for fraud. Luckily, he had actually done an interview with Wired magazine. He was kind of like one of the entrepreneurs of the dark web before it was the dark web. And Wired magazine done a whole profile on him. So he was able to show him, hey, this is me. I am actually in there for fraud. Your relationships in there, you actually talk about you befriended a black inmate in there, taught you how to play spades and stuff like that. With that swastika being on your neck, I'm sure that's going to be one of the first things people notice. How did that conversation take place and how did that kind of progress throughout your time in there?
Yeah, and it was a couple of black guys, they were kids actually. That's how come I was friends with them because we were 17-year-old kids in adult maximum security prison. You know what I mean? So you kind of just like, oh, that's another kid. So
yeah.
But there was, it was my dude up in county jail. County jail was tough, man. I mean, not tough in like you have to watch your back. It's just tough and it's nerve wracking and you're waiting trial and you know what I mean? And you just never know, what's going to go on. And Um, there's no gang affiliations really up in the county like that at the time, just because, we're all just trying to wait our trials out. And so there's not a lot of trouble, but then there was also just, new guys on the cell block be trouble. So, but anyway, I get on this new cell block. Hold on, man. I'm gonna tell you the full story here.
Okay.
So, I'm in, when I first got locked up because of I had suicide attempts. I had broken out of a mental hospital. We didn't get to talk about any of that, but, so when I'm in the county jails after all that, so they know all that about me. And then, so they put me in the segregation in the hole just because, I was 17. I attempted suicide before. They had all this stuff. Like, so they put me in the hole where it was where they put the people who were going crazy. People defecating everywhere and then flooding their cells to flood everyone else's cell with their crap in it. I mean, it was just horrendous up in there. But they put me up in there for my own protection. So, man, and I'm in there, and I remember I started reading different religious stuff, and I read like the Book of Mormons. I read a bunch, I had nothing but time to do in that cell block is just read, and you get one book a week. So hopefully you grab a thick book, which is usually one of the religious books, which is the thick book. You know what I mean? So anyway, I get to seeing this one part about fasting and that God will reveal himself if you fast to him. So I'm like, all right, man. So I'm going to not eat for a couple days. And, God, and what I want is I want God to kill all the guards, knock down the wall, you know what I mean? And pop my door. If you're a real dude, you'll do this shit for me. If you're real, come on. And so I'm sitting there, and so I start fasting one day. It was a Friday. I just decided over the weekend I'm not going to eat. I'm going to see if this fasting. But it also says you cannot brag or boast that you're fasting for God. Like, you can't go around and be like, "Yo, I'm not eating because God's my boy," and you're all dead on Monday because it's when God's gonna answer my prayers. I can't be doing that. So, what I did, man, is I fasted, and when they would come, they asked me why I was not eating, because the guards would, because I was in the cell box where they would pull down your little tray, your little tray slot, and then they slide your tray in there, and so that I would push the food out because I knew I would eat it if it was in my cell, so I would push it out. And they said, "Are you refusing to eat?" And I say, "Yeah." And they say, "Why?" And I was like, "Man, I can't tell you." Um, so about 3 days go by, and then the lieutenant, who was like the warden of this huge county jail, it was a huge county jail. It wasn't like Mayberry here. Um, he comes in to see me and asks me, pulls me out of my cell, which was like the first time I'd been out of my cell probably in like days. And he pulls me out of my cell and he sits me in the day room and he says, "Why are you not eating?" And I was like, "I don't know. And he said, "Are you on a hunger strike?" I said, "No, I'm not on a hunger strike." I'm like, "No, I'm not." And he's just like, "Are you trying to kill yourself?" And I'm like, "No." And he says, "Well, he says again, why are you not eating?" And all I'm thinking is like, for real, like, I can't tell you because I just can't. Anyway, the next day, so when we get done talking, he looks at me and says, "Mr. Mink, I don't think you need to belong in this cell block. So if you eat tomorrow, if you're saying you're not on a hunger strike, then if you eat tomorrow, then I'll let you out. I'll put you in general population, or he's like, I'll put you somewhere else." And I was like, okay. So the morning came, I ate, I was so hungry, and he was right there to keep his word. And I'll tell you, man, going into this new cell block, there was this feeling that I get for the rest of my life. I'll always get it. No, is that in that moment, God proved he was really there. Like, he didn't give me what I wanted. He gave me what I needed.
Right.
And that was to get out of that cell block. I mean, I started talking to myself in there. Like, I was going crazy. That's what happens in there. So anyway, and then from there, man, I get on a new cell block. It's where I meet G. It's where I meet Jello. It's where I met uh Kane. I met like a whole bunch of these young brothers that were like just waiting trial on drugs and shit. You know what I mean? And they knew I was a neo-Nazi and shit. They were, they'd been in and out the joint themselves, so they seen the symbol. It's not that big a deal to them. And yeah, it was G the first day. We're sitting there. He asked me if I knew how to play spades. I didn't know how to play spades. He kind of showed me a little bit about how, to count the cards. And so, each one has 13 and breaks it all down. And then he starts like teaching me, if we start playing, that he'll have little hand signs. And that means you should come back in that suit, like a low number, like a 2 of hearts. So I can cut them because I'm going to cut them, or I have a high heart or whatever. And so like he just broke it all down for me, man. And then like after that, like whenever new, because the county jail's constantly funneling in and out inmates until they get bailed out. It's a big system. And so, man, we were just sitting there and play dudes for peanut butter and jellies, man. And we just rack them up, just rack them. Like, dude, we just cheated all the time. Here's some neo-Nazi dude with a kid that was from Chicago who happens to be down, caught up in this case down in Springfield, and we're like, white man can't jump. It's right. It's a whole nother movie right there. I mean, like,
Yeah.
we literally pulled that off. Like, we would just go, and anytime two old brothers would sit down and they wouldn't think anything of it, my boy would be like, yeah, you want to play us? And for peanut butter and jellies, because it's what we always played for, was our morning peanut butter and jellies. But you want to play for your peanut butter and jellies? And they'd be like, yeah, and here's this little white boy fucking, coming back in all the right suits all the time.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I
I
got
think
really
you're
good at the
fun.
game. Like, I'm phenomenally good at spades and dominoes now. Like, I'm seriously gone and played like tournaments and done really well, and especially dominoes. So anyway, and those guys taught me that.
That's amazing. You also talk about football, getting to play a little football in there.
Yeah, man. I was like, we only played like maybe three organized full games like ever, and it was like, so, and it wasn't like pads or anything like that. It was, we just played, the other cell block. Sometimes we played ourselves, but most of the time we played like the other cell block that was out there. And like my first job, man, was because it was kind of rough tackle with no equipment. I mean, we just um, with no referees, by the way. And so when I first wanted to go play, I said, well, can I play? And my boy kind of vouched for me. He's like, yeah, he's a white boy. He plays basketball with us sometimes. He's pretty good. I was pretty good at basketball too. So he was like, he's good, whatever. So finally, the one guy was like, all right, you could play. You can do kickoff returns, knowing that like no one's going to block for me. You know what I mean? And it's going to be full on the other side, like just running top speed at me. And but dude, I'm fast. I'm short. I have little sick little spin moves, and I put a couple of these little spin moves on, and just just hit that hole and was gone on that thing. And you ain't catching this. You ain't catching this. You ain't catching this, white boy. I just gotta say that you're not. Like, especially when I'm scared. Like, you're just not catching me, and I'm just gone. And right then they made me like a wide receiver, and play DB, and just I'm good at the game. Just and so those guys always became cool with. You know what I mean? When we would play, like, they would pick up for me sometimes when people would cheap shot me. That I would see them come push people off of me and stuff. You know what I mean? Or people that were just being rude or ignorant to me. And they kind of always had my back out there. It was kind of cool. And anyway, there were guys I talked to. I talked to them every once in a while when we were doing chow. If it was like a neutral table, we could sit at, because sometimes in prison there was tables that were not neutral, and
Right.
they would be sitting at their gang table. Like, I couldn't go sit at a gangster disciple table. You know what I mean? So,
Right.
but if they're sitting at a neutral table, or it was just some type of neutron area, I mean, we still would converse, and I still hung out with my Aryans too, man. Like, I was kind of, that's the other thing, man. I'll tell you another funny story. Um, one of the ways I became like the most intelligent racist in prison, and like solidified my standing in the movement, was, so when I got out of prison, I had a tattoo up inside my head that says "Made in Philly." Well, anyway, and I had another tattoo on the back of my head. Well, I got like my hair all trimmed up because I didn't get shaved when I was up in prison. Everyone knew who I was, but I
Right.
just I grew out my hair for court because I had tattoos on my head, and so I just kind of kept it once I went upstate. And was like, I mean, it was everyone knew I was a neo I had swastikas everywhere, and I anyway I was walking by this queen of black, the queen. That's just the transgender man in prison, or
Right.
however you want to label it. It was a dudes in prison that are dressing like women, and that's how they live their lives, right? We call
Right.
them, and we judge. I don't know if they're actually called the queens. That's just what we always called them, the queens. When they all hung out, we said, "Oh, the queens." Anyway,
Makes sense.
yeah. So anyway, I don't want to get canceled here. Uh, um, so anyway, this black queen was walking by me and was like, "Where are you from?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm from Philly. I'm from South Philly." And she was like, "Oh my God, I'm from Southside Chicago." And I was like, "Wow, great. What a coincidence. Like, good for you." And I kind of walked off and was kind of rude and that's just the way I was. It's just who the human being that I was back then. Would just be rude to people like that. Just like, whatever. And so later on that night, we're all hanging out on this little walk track, and it was a baseball field, but it had like a gate. And the gate was on the, obviously the baseball field, whatever, was on the other side, and it was like you couldn't get to it. The gate was closed for the day. And so anyway, we're just standing there, and there's bleachers, and we're all sitting there, and while we're all standing there, I'm kind of like standing looking at all my other guys who are sitting there, and they're all sitting on the bleachers, and my buddy's introducing me to them all. He's like, "Yo, this is that dude with the TV show." Like he's telling her all like, "Oh, that's what's up," And so while we're talking, that transgender person came walking back by us, and as they walked by us, she was really loud and was like, "Hey, what's up, Nazi?" or something like along those lines. And she had a friend with her. And when I turned to look, she like hit her friend, and she like, "See, I told you, he's cute, isn't he? He's cute." And now I know she's paying me back for me being rude to her, but she's doing it right in front of my friend. Like, she's like, "Fuck you." Right. So now in that moment, I'm like blushing now because it's the first time in prison anyone's calling me cute. And there's a whole situation going on here that, I don't know how to handle. So I'm blushing. I'm blushing. And as I turn back to all the other Aryans, this one guy goes, and he's trying to show off to me again. I have all this knowledge of this movement. These guys really don't have much knowledge. They joined the Aryans in prison, and now I'm like got like knowledge of and our stances and what this means and what that means. Whatever the literature. This dude trying to show off in front of the other guys says to me really loud, "Hey Frank, how about that? When the master race takes over, he's going to get shot twice. He's black and he's gay." And I stopped him and I was like, "No, guys, that's a good thing." And they were all like, "Yo, like, what kind of East Coast, what do you got going on around? Like, what are you guys accepting over there on the East Coast? Like, that's not okay, right?" And I'm like, "No, guys, if he's black and he's gay, he's not going to be with a woman. He's not going to reproduce his race. It's a good thing." And it took them all like a minute to be like, "Damn, like, that's deep shit." Like to them, that was like some deep hate. Like I knew why to hate. You know what I mean? Like I had reasons. It wasn't like, "Yeah, I just hate them." Like it was like, to them, and I'll never forget, man. It was kind of like almost like I was the genius after that.
Yeah, I can see them now thinking like, ah, I could just kind of be a
Yeah,
light bulb turning on
no,
there.
I get, yeah,
So
dude's good.
all in all, did you have any like run-ins where you had to, go toe to toe with anybody in there, or did you kind of
Yeah,
fairly smooth, at least in that portion?
no, yeah, man, I don't stop running my mouth, man. I didn't, I'll be honest, man. I didn't stop running my mouth. Um, got into it with a vice lawyer, the Four Corner Hustler, which was a chapter of the vice lord organization,
Mhm.
and it was a whole mess up and a mix up over something stupid, and so that happened, and then so I was running the chow hall in the back. That was my, since I'm higher up in the gang, you're kind of the manager of whatever department you're in. If they know the staff lets us do that. You know what I mean? So I'm managing, which was a very small crew, by the way, because I'm young. I'm not like managing a whole. There's a couple guys back in the kitchen with me. We cleaned up and stole food all the time. But one of the guys who was not one of us. He wasn't a member. He was just kind of a dude that always kind of hung around us and kind of a geeky kind of guy, big guy though, tall guy. And anyway, he had told me that he had snitched on the black inmate. There was a black disciples. They ran the cooking the bread and doing the cooking and doing a lot of the cooking and stuff, the cooks and the chefs. So he knew how they were sneaking out the yeast, and that they had snuck a bunch of yeast out, and it was in this bucket waiting to get picked up. And he told on them, and he came back and he was bragging to us about telling on them. And those guys were pretty cool with us. Like we were not the best allies with each other, obviously, but we were, there was no animosity right at the time between us, and so for him to do that was unacceptable. And I called him out in front of a couple of the members, and basically said like, you're done, like you better walk yourself to protective custody. And when I turned my head, he hit me with he had a mop right by him, and he hit me upside the head with a big wet mop. And I just turned and just went crazy on him. And I just remember him screaming, "Get this fucker off me!" Like I just lost my shit, man. And yeah,
Dude, like
so that
hit
was
it with a mop, like was it wet? That's even worse.
yeah, it was a wet mop
Oh
right
yeah.
upside my head, man.
Yeah,
Like
that's like it's not even the physical aspect. It's almost just like the pissing you off that's gonna
yeah,
set
dude.
fire to you.
Yeah, like and I think he thought it was going to hurt me or knock me over, and it just didn't. Like for whatever reason, I'm not the biggest tough guy here, but I do have taken a few punches in my life,
Yeah.
and so I hit this just it's time to go. It's not time to rub my face and say ouch, or it's time to go. So
And it's not like he picked up a can or something and hit you with it. Yeah, that probably would have packed a little punch. But it's like if anybody
yeah,
got hit with a wet towel, it's gonna sting, but it's just gonna piss you off.
yeah. And if he would have hit me with more of the wood part, he probably would have messed me up, especially with the mop end being down this way. It probably would have been
Right.
a lot heavier. But now he just hit me full on mop right in the face, man. I mean, I was taught, and I wouldn't shut up. That's the other thing. Like, the guy was like, "Okay, I'm gonna walk," man. I just wouldn't shut up. I was like, whatever. That you snitch and child molester, whatever.
Yeah.
I never
How,
shut up, man. I never shut up.
how long were you there before you got transferred?
I got transferred twice while I was there.
Okay.
Went to intake and then got transferred to actually four times then. So I got transferred over to this place called Big Muddy, which is now only a prison for child molesters in the state of Illinois. But back then it was brand new prison, like it was brand spanking new. Um, and it was for everybody, but they did have a ward that was more generated towards sex offenders. I remember that. So anyway, I went there. Um, had a had a blast there. Actually, I'm not trying to be. I hate when people think I'm trying to make prison sound fun, but dude, I was insane. I had a girlfriend on the outside who I tortured every day with phone. Let me be real about life. I was, who you talking with, who you doing, dude, insane, absolutely insane. So for me even to say that I had okay a time at over, but anyway, I wound up getting in trouble at Big Muddy because I there was a thing called three-way calling. People still have it now, where you click over on your phone and you right,
Mhm.
and a lot of this we were way down in Southern Illinois, and so I had friends in Springfield that I would call, and I would sell three-way calling to you know one of the disciples, one of the kings, whoever was Madonna, like because we're allowed to deal with each other like that. You know what I mean? And I was doing it, and I was selling it to this one like head Latin king guy, and the one day he came up to my cell and to pay me for I, gave him extra time or something, whatever, to pay me, he came up to smoke a joint with me in my cell. And so he comes up and there hadn't been there was no reason to even think there was like going to be a cell checks or anyone on the tier at the time. It just, very rare. But anyway, we're sitting there smoking a joint in my cell, and we were getting ready making the incense because you can burn toilet paper with deodorant to make it into incense. So we're like making that up while we're smoking, and then we get the alarm, whatever it was, whatever the fucking alarm was, meaning that there's guards on the tier. And I'm like, oh shit. And my cell wasn't far from where the door was, which is kind of shitty. And so he hurried up. And as soon as he heard that, he runs out my cell. I'm left there holding this like deodorant thing. And the fucking lieutenant, it was a lieutenant and a guard, and they walked by my cell, and I had like dropped everything or whatever at the time. Or it wasn't, I didn't think I was super obvious, but they walked by my cell and then they stopped and then they both walked back and looked back at my cell. So now I'm high. Now I'm paranoid. I'm like, who the fuck? So anyway, then I got later on that night, I got a letter from the prison in my mail saying, you have a piss test tomorrow morning.
Oh
So
shit!
yeah, and
So
it's a
you
big
thought you
deal.
got away with it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's a big deal to get caught with weed or any drug in your system. It's very big. You could get extra charges because basically you are the walking drug itself. You know what I mean? It's kind of this thing. And so uh, anyway, I go do my piss test and was informed by some of my older inmates that you just say, I don't want to take a piss test for religious reasons, and that's good enough, right? So I go there and big security guard, big, correctional officer standing there, and he's like, "Here you go, Mr. Meeink." And I just remember I looked down and said, "Can't do it, man." And he's like, "Why?" And I was like, "Religious reasons." And he just goes, "What religion is this, Mr. Meeink?" Or whatever. He'll probably called me by my number, but he said, "What religion is this?" And I said, "I don't know, man. The kind where I'm not allowed to pee in a cup. That's all I know. That's all I know, man." Anyway, I got a max transfer. They put me in the hole for a couple weeks there, and then they shipped me out to Menard, which was where John Wayne Gacy was, the serial killer. So I'm in the same prison with him for a minute. Then I got shipped off to Shawnee, and Shawnee was crazy. When I got to Shawnee, it was not nothing. It was a war had just ended. The war between the bikers, specifically the bikers, and this gang called the Latin Folks. The war generated to where there was while I was in the prison waiting to get transferred. The one day I happened to see that they brought a transferee in who had a big thing wrapped around his whole face and was just bad. And turns out that was in the middle of the war between the bikers and the Latin folk. One of the bikers stabbed one of the Latin folks guys' eyes out with a pencil. And so I'm showing up at that prison right after that incident just had happened. And so there's either going to be a bigger war, or it's going to come to peace, because the Latin folk were trying to steal and make the Aryans, or the bikers at the time, pay a tax. And they're like, "We're not paying a tax. We'll go to war over this." And so I show up, and these negotiations are just starting. And I'm like, don't know all the prison culture still yet. I'm still learning, transferring, and all that. But I got to be part of like this little peace treaty thing right when I show up. And my job was to go into protective custody. No, not like really protective custody. I didn't need to go into protective custody, but I needed to get into that cell block to go in and rally all the guys, because a lot of them had locked themselves down because the war had gotten so bad. So my job was to go in there, and I spent like, I don't know, I think it was like a week or something in protective custody. Toughest week of your life, because you're like, man, I don't need this place. Your manhood. You're like, I don't need this place. But seriously, I was in there just trying to get all of our boys to come out, that the war was over, and that because a bunch of them were transferring out of the prison, and we were trying to get them not transfer, because we had probably lost like 15 men at the time. So anyway,
you were successful in brokering that piece.
Yeah, I mean, we got it done. It was peace. It was very peaceful time right after that. I mean, I wasn't like a huge part of it. And again, I showed up right this fucking gang. This war was going on. I mean, it was just ending. Yeah. So, I mean, I just remember they asked me to go in and get some of the guys out and to try to talk them into not transferring to another prison, because that's what they were all putting in for, and why they were in protective custody. So,
how much time did you have at that one?
When I got to Shawnee, I probably did my last remaining 7 months in Shawnee. So that was like the last place I showed up, and and it was a pretty peaceful time. And I mean, there were some lockdowns and some brawls, and we got hit by a tornado one time.
So I mean, all things considered, when you said you were fasting and you were asking God to help, he kind of laid out an easiest road possible, if there is such a thing, while having to do time in federal prison. I mean,
yeah. I think about that too, man. Like he did, it made my time easy, man.
Had
like
you people always there like, earlier, you could have gotten killed and been in the middle of that,
Yep. And people are always like, "Weren't you worried about like rape stuff and all that?" And I'm like, I never once worried about that in my life. Like it just didn't. It was nothing that ever was part of my. Like I always showered with my guys. We always have to shower together and shit. But even it's just crazy. Like God did make it to where I wasn't like full of fear. I probably was still, but whatever. Right? God made that easy on me. I can tell that. Yes, definitely.
That's a lot of I've heard people talk that's done time in prison. They say one of the worst. Some guys have to, I guess. I say have to, but it's beneficial for them. You come in there with a name and a history, so it was probably a little bit better than someone that's coming in there that nobody has a clue who you are. But the second you do click up with someone, a group, a faction, or whatever the case may be, then you inherit every beat they have. Whereas if you didn't necessarily have to click on a certain kind of faction. You were able to kind of float around, do business here, do business there. But if you're coming in and you join up, if they got a problem with group A over here, you got a problem with group A. Same thing across the board.
Yeah. I mean, it's for those people that have been down, man, when there's like an on-site, if you see one on site, that's it. Like your job is to attack.
No
and
time.
Those are scary, scary times in there, boy. That's going on.
You mentioned the prison that Gacy was at. I think I heard you say that there was a hit on Gacy. I know he was kind of hard to get to, but there was kind of like was that just around prison or whatever? Like if you could get to Gacy, if you took him out, there was a price on his head.
Yeah. There's a price on his head. Yeah. And it's there was a price on his head. Obviously, they executed him finally, but if you could get to him, and so I remember because the day that I got transferred to Menard because he was there, he wasn't in Stateville yet, he was at Menard. I remember I was getting off the bus, and the guard happened to say something to me about being 17, because that's how old all of his victims were. And he was like, "Yeah, you like maybe we'll put you in with Gacy." And again, because I run my mouth all the time, I was like, go ahead, I'll fucking kill him, So I remember wasn't scared, but I remember there was this brief moment and where he was talking to me about that, where I was like, wow, man, like the people of the state of Illinois and the people in general really think that I'm that bad of a human being that it's okay for me to be in prison with this guy. Like there was this surreal moment with me in that moment one time when he was saying that thing to me where I was just like, wow, like I don't, because all my good intentions in my head doesn't, because I'm full of good intentions.
Right.
And it was like one of the moments where it's like, wow, people really do think I'm a bad human being, even though I'm kidnapping people, right? But because it's in my head, I mean, I'm an alcoholic. I'm broken. I'm a broken person.
So you get out. What is your belief system still the same way you went in? Is it wavered a little bit? Where are you at here when you get out?
Yeah, so I get out and just with the experiences I was having and all that, there was things that were bothering me about the white supremacist movement. It just things that just weren't gelling, just silly, stupid little things too, like where people are like, well, all black people are this way. And you kind of you're like, that's not really true, and that they're all like this. And I don't know. And so I'll tell you, man, what I got tired of, and hopefully some of your listeners will even identify with this, man. I got tired of being the guy who was standing up for this racist view, but I knew that when, I hate all black people except for Rodney. Rodney's cool. I work with Rodney, you know what I mean? And John, me and John we knew each other from school. He was cool. I know he's got a beautiful family now. I hate them all but them guys because I know them.
Mm-hmm.
And I hated that, man. I felt so stupid. I hate all Latino people, except for Juan and Michael, because I know them. They're cool. But the rest are the way I think they are. And I got tired of being that guy. So what I did was, I wanted to stay part of this movement because it was everything. I mean, all my clout in this world is in that movement.
Yeah.
And I put a lot of time and drunken effort into that. So I want to hold on to that. And so I was like, I remember making this decision going, you know what, I'm just going to preach against the Jews. It's the easiest, it's the go-to. And when they talk about black issues, I'm just going to say, shrug it off. And that's really what I was believing. And when I would go to a neo-Nazi gathering or friends and sitting around and they would say stuff, I didn't have the cojones to stand up and be like, no, that's all wrong. They're not all that way. But I just remember in my head going, oh, that sounds so I remember this moment so many times going, oh, that sounds so stupid. And I used to say that same thing 4 years ago. I said exactly what he just said and thought it was brilliant at the time. And now it's stupid. Right. But on the Jewish thing, so of course, I'm going to try this whole new thing where I'm just going to go against the Jews. And God's like, no, man, I got a plan for you. So right away, I'm looking for work. I have a big swastika on my neck. I got skinhead written on my knuckles. I got aggravated kidnapping already on my record. Yo, these ain't good people skills. So You know, you're not management isn't like, oh, definitely he's got a swastika. He'll be management in a week. What the hell? Yeah, you know, like it's just not what they do, man. So I couldn't find work. Shocking, shocking. And this buddy of mine said he can get me a job at an antique show, bringing in and out antique furniture. Some thing in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And I was like, all right. He said a guy will pay me $100 a day just to carry in and out this antique furniture for this little showcase thing. All right. And as soon as I say I get the job, my buddy, who was also a neo-Nazi, but anyway, he was also a neo-Nazi, who Keith had hired, this guy Keith. So I told him, I said, does Keith, it's the guy who owns the company. I said, does Keith know about me? Like, have you told him? He said you're going to give me a job, but does he know about me? And he goes, oh yeah, I told him all about you. And he says he doesn't give a rat's ass what we believe, just don't break his furniture. Right. And I showed up and I worked for this guy, and he was amazing. He just was an amazing human being. Like, he was this guy who was just like, and he acted Jewish. He talked Jewish, the Upper East Coast Jew. You know, he's like, oh, you know, he did stuff like that. But man, like, at the end of, and I just had some spare conversations with the guy as I was working for him. You know, basically we were both busy all the time. He was selling, I was carrying, whatever. But he'd get lunch for everybody. We'd all talk. And anyway, at the end of the weekend, he owes me $300, and I probably made like $600 in tips because because you're carrying furniture out to people's cars, you know, after they buy it. So people tip you very well. It's antiques and stuff, you know. And so I made like $600 in tips. So I know that he knows that. So I think he's going to Jew me. You know, he's going to say, like, I'm not going to give you $300. You made the $300 in the tips. You know, like we do with everybody in the anti-Semitic, where we plan out the argument. You know what I mean? This person's going to say that. I'm going to say this. You know, and it makes your whole morning having that great argument in your head. You know what I mean? And so I had that argument with this guy. He's not going to pay me. And so he comes up and he says, how much do I owe you? And I'm like, $300. And he says, oh, okay. Here's one, two. He pulls out this little wad of money. Here's 300. You know what? Here's an extra $100. You're a really good worker. So now I got $1,000.
Wow.
And that was like the first real work out of prison. And then he asked me if I needed a ride home. He gave me a ride back to South Philly and from the truck, and this big work truck. And we got to talking. And then he asked me if I wanted to come work for him full time. And I worked for this man full time and spent a lot of time with him and just worked with him, and still was trying to hold on to this, still dressed every day like I was a neo-Nazi, still did the whole fucking thing, showed up to work every day. And Keith would take me a lot with him in the truck, and we would just talk and bullshit with each other. And man, you know, two guys, it was the O.J. Simpson's trial was a big thing at the time. So we were always talking about like DNA and what's this, it's all this, and we would just rap about life. And anyway, man, like a lot of people in this world, I have this issue inside my head, man. When I do something and I make a mistake, I instantly go to Frank, you're so stupid. You know, you're so stupid. And one day I broke something in front of Keith, and I was like, yo, I'm so stupid, Keith. And he just gripped me up and said, stop saying you're stupid, you idiot. You're one of the smartest people I know. And I got back in the truck that day, and for whatever reason, man, it was one of these days where we had time. We were cutting through New Jersey, ain't much to look at in New Jersey. So you just talk with each other. And I remember him saying something about, he hates that I say I'm stupid. He's like, you're really smart. You're a really, really smart person. And then he went on to go say these words to me, which have stuck with me to this day. He said, Frank, smart people can fake being dumb, but dumb people can't fake being smart. You just are. Like, deal with it. Deal with it. You're a smart person, and stop putting off that you're stupid, you know? And I remember that day, man, I was kind of like, I don't know, man. He just said some things, man, that just really got to me. And I was like, but deep down inside, I'm going to say, I hate this guy, and I want to kill him, and I want another Holocaust. And like, are you insane? And I just, for the final time, where I was just like, okay, it was me, God, and I was walking home that day, and I was just like, I'm just done. Like, I know it. Like, I'm beating my head against a wall to try to prove things that I'm not even believing anymore.
Yeah.
You know? And so that was my final big day, man, where I was like, you know what, this is, like, I'm wrong. And it was the thing where I was like admitting to God in my walk. I was walking from my work stop back to my mom's house. And I just remember in this walk just being like, you're right. Like, this is like almost a form of evil. So, let me just fast forward real quick. Um, Two things, man. It's, become part of those neo-Nazi groups and white supremacist movements, man. Like, again, like, it's the most laziest thing you could do. Like, you didn't do anything. You just happen to be born with this color of skin, and you think that you're better than enough. Like, that's insane thinking to me now. And before I thought that was, yeah, God gave us this skin and da, da, da. And I didn't accomplish anything. I didn't go out and do anything good for humanity. I was just proud of my white skin. Come on. And then you know, the second part about that is, and this is what I know to be true today, is that look, in 300 years, we're all going to be one race of color. It's impossible to stop, right? There's no race war anyone can have now. There's too many of all of us here. It's too late. You know what? That's the situation we're in. We're prepared to do that, because in 300 years from now, when we're all one race of people, we're going to be that for 3,000 years or more. And we're going to look back on these times now and be like, oh my, what were we thinking? What are we thinking? Like, maybe our goal here in America is that we make this thing happen in the good way. We make it happen in a right way. Because one day all of our DNA is gonna match. It's inevitable. It's impossible to stop. They can try and say, nope, we're gonna have our own home white land. And that's gonna last maybe 10 years, if that, if they try to do that. Because just like the Republican Party of today, see how they fight amongst themselves so bad? Because the same thing would happen if they got their own little white homeland. You're not conservative enough, you're this enough, you're not that, and they would just dissolve. And you would come right back into the fold of, that's the truth. And so my job today is to start saying to people, like, let's prepare for us to become this one tribe, because it's inevitable going to happen. And it's, so anyway, that's where I am with my beliefs on all that. So
And it's important when someone stands up and tells a story. It resonates different when they've been through it. They're not reading from a textbook, or they're not giving something that they learned from a class or some sort of seminar that they took, and then they're conveying that message to. When someone's been through it, I always say, when someone's been through the mud and got out, you can respect their story a whole lot better because they've been there. My wife's actually a guidance counselor for high school.
Sure.
And the kids resonate with her. They would rather see her than their own guidance counselor in lots of cases, because she doesn't judge them, no matter what they can come and tell they did the most craziest shit ever. And she don't judge, because she, out of our upbringing, we were, it was a rough upbringing, it was tough. And I think the kids can see through bullshit, as opposed to somebody that's never been in trouble a day in their life. The worst thing they've done is, broke the speed limit or something like that.
Right.
You're not gonna get through to a troubled kid in today's society with that, but if they see you're real, then you're going to gain their attention. They're going to listen to you. They're going to soak in what you're saying. And, that's great. The work that you started doing since you've been out, you had a speech on a podcast that I was listening to today where you kind of going off about, the police and their, abilities to just basically go in, kick in doors and abuse their power. And you got me so excited. And this is me. And I've been through similar stuff to this, but I mean, you even got me excited. So that's why I was like, I love to hear this guy talk. And but you got that from your experiences.
Yeah. And that is, and the whole reason why, God gives us these experiences is to, to further help other people, right? When I go through a bad situation, if I can keep in the front of my mind that I'm doing this, but eventually I'm going to help someone else that's going through this, it makes the situation a lot easier to go through. It just does, right? Yeah, man. Like, to start off with, I've always, after I got out of the neo-Nazi world, man, I really, and I seen the Oklahoma City bombing, I was like, F this, I'm going to try and help stop this as much as I can, with every possible ability that I've been able to give. I'm going to help stop this. So I started help start programs like Life After Hate and Harmony Through Hockey, and doing interventions on neo-Nazis and the family members. being part of different peace treaties and stuff that I got to be part of. Anyway, I have all this experience, but the one thing I've been trying to tell people is that, like, if we want to, again, people are always like, well, how do we fight racism? And I'm saying, like, the one thing we really have to look out for right now, and this is like the private prison industry. Like, we really, really, this is really dangerous stuff. And it's backed by lobbyists and unions. And so when people like to talk to me, they always go, "Oh, you're like an anti-police actor," and I'm always like, "No, I'm just anti-mass incarceration, and I know that is the product of the way that we are policed today, and that is a fact." And you know, Black people, people of color, and the poor do not have the full bill of rights when they interact with our government, which is law enforcement. Remember, people couldn't keep separating the two. They're part of the government, and they have built mass incarceration off of tricks like traffic stops, pulling over anyway, because their let's do some of their ones. Oh, because your tag light was too dim, So now, because you're an American now, but because your tag light was too dim, you're now handcuffed while your car's being searched, and probably with your kids in the car too.
Mm-hmm.
That's happening in this country all the time. Then there's policing for profit, where police is, little townships, they have maybe like a major highway that cuts through their little township. So they hire tons of officers, and all they do is sit on that damn highway and look for anyone that's made any infraction, but they're looking for Black people too. They're looking for Black people. Like, they don't want them coming up there. And this is America. Like, that's and this policing for profit is insane. Where townships do their whole budget now off of the cops going out and just looking for every little thing. That's not what we're about. It's not what this country is about. And that's happening everywhere, all across the country. It's bad. The civil forfeitures, where police get to take your stuff, even if you've not been convicted of a crime. They could just suspect that you have too much cash on you. Say you're poor, and you look poor to them, so you have $7,000 in cash on you. They will take it, and they have every right to now, because of the way their lobbyists and unions have set this up. And then you got to go prove to them, to the police, and their little counsel. It's not a judge when they do civil forfeitures. You got to go to the police and prove to them that you were not going to do illegal stuff with that money. This is set up for a trap. And then if they do give you back your money, they fine you. They will fine you for it being confiscated. So you'll still keep 15 to 20% of it. Like, this is stuff that was not supposed to be a part of our civil servants to us. Like, this is not. So there's a bunch of things that we need to change in policing to stop the growth of mass incarceration. One more point I like to make about that is, see, when I say just pulling people over and the growth of mass incarceration, the truth be told is that, say they pull a guy over and they smell weed, very common, 8 million stops last year, maybe more than that, 10 million stops last year. This trick is gone. So now they get to pull you out of the car because they smell weed, which is very subjective. Who knows? Was it weed? Was it a cigarette? Right? Because they don't care. Police don't care. It's what they say. So now you're pulled out of your car. Maybe they find something. Maybe you have two different medicines. In a medicine, that's another charge. So if you had maybe put some Tylenol in with your your prescription medicine, and the cops, because they will go through your medicine when they're searching your, oh yeah. And if you have different, they will charge your ass. They will look for any reason to charge you. And now that gets you put in the county jail, which, by the way, mass incarceration isn't all the people in upstate no more. It's the growth of the American county jail system, which is beneficial to the police, right? That's who gets paid for every night that you're in there, is the police. So they want to keep those county jails going. On top of that, so this kid gets this little case now. Now he has a little bit of a record, and I know that they say they can get stuff expunged, but when you look up on people's police jacket, they will always have the arrest. Always. They can bullshit us all they want. If they look deep enough, they will find every arrest you've ever been arrested for, even if it's an arrest jacket. So, but now we get this guy, he's got this little case, and say then he doesn't show up for court on this stupid little case. And now he's got a bench warrant. Now the police get to pull everyone out of cars, search everyone's IDs all the time because they're looking for massive people with bench warrants. Or on top of that, maybe he does go to court, but he can't make his payments. So now he's got a bench warrant. So now the police get to pull everyone out, especially black people and poor people, out of the car. Everybody, we want IDs because we're looking for people with bench warrants. And when they do that, they sound like Nazis. Everyone have papers. Everyone have papers in the car to make sure you're not wanted to go back to our mass incarceration. Like, dude, this is broken. And I'm just doing my job as so religiously. I'm bound to be an activist. But not on top of that is that I know that when I speak out and when I've spoken out against this, my black friends and my loved ones and my fellow activists have continued to say, please, Frank, you keep speaking. You know what I mean? Like we want you to keep speaking. So I've been doing it because they know that, for one, I've listened. Run down this quick story for you. So jump back to the Native Americans. So the Native Americans are Lakota Sioux and Ojibwe up in the northern plains, people like that. They were all gathered up by General Custer. He was very famous for being very brutal to the Native Americans, very brutal. And when they would kidnap the wives and the children to try to capture the men, because that's what was very common, they weren't very kind to those women up in those. You know, it's just the truth, man. We need to deal with this stuff. So anyway, we do all this to try to get them to go back to the Black Hills because we want all natives that are in the North Plains to go to the Black Hills so to get out of our way, basically, is what we're doing. So eventually we get a bunch of them up there at the Black Hills, and then we find gold. And in that time, there was the Custer's Last Stand where Custer was killed by these same native groups, tribes. So anyway, when Custer was killed, they have mutilated his body. They really did. This is a fact. And they like pierced his ears and they did a bunch of stuff to try to tell the people to listen. That's why they did it. And they pierced his ears and stuff after he was dead, to mutilate his body to tell the government and the people of this country, please listen to the people. And at the time they meant the native people. Please listen to us. You're not listening. Anyhow, when we get them up in the Black Hills, we wind up finding gold and we kind of move them and we steal all the gold and then we move them back on. And when we move them back on, we put this big national park in the middle of their most spiritual land. Their most spiritual land is up in the Black Hills, and they put Custer State Park right in the middle. And that's still there to this day. Custer's nickname is Indian Killer. So when natives who all have to live around that, because there's a couple reses up there that have to live around that, it's not Custer State Park, it's Indian Killer State Park to them. See, so we're not listening. We don't listen. And if you want to go back now, and everyone wants to quote Martin Luther King all the time, you hear people quoting Malcolm X, James Baldwin, you can hear all these people, they'll quote them. And then you can go down that list continuously of Huey Newton, Fred Hampton, you can just go down the list. All of these brothers talked about one thing. I mean, they all had their own little separate issues, different segregation battles, but they all talk about one thing: police brutality. It's continuously been in all. They're not lying to us. And that's what my job is, to do this, to say, like, they're not lying. They've been telling the truth. They've been coming. And for me, as a kid who came from an abusive home, who, when I tried to tell people, yo, I'm scared to go home, they told me I was making it up, or I was blowing it out of proportion, or it's not real, or maybe I deserved it, or maybe it's just not that bad. And you know what that did to me? It drove me to become a neo-Nazi. What do you think when the Black community has been continuously telling us, yo, we're being abused. We're totally being abused. And we're like, nah, well, kind of deserve it. What do you think that does to them?
Yeah, what does it drive them to?
So it's time, man. It's time for us to change. It's time for policing to change in America. It's time for us to get ready, because we're going to become this one tribe anyway. So we better start accepting that and working towards that goal together, because it's really what's going to happen. It's the truth. So.
No, you're 100%. And unfortunately, people don't put too much thought and effort into these types of situations until they find themselves in the middle of them. And I myself was one, and I'll admit that lots of times before I had the situation that I had, if I seen something on TV, I would take it for face value. Oh,
Mhm.
I got caught doing this, doing that. Now I don't look at it like that. I look at
Mhm.
why did this happen, or why did this, take place. And for instance, I'll share a quick story of my own really quick. When I got out of the situation that I was in, I was just got out of jail, and I was watching the TV, and it said, kid arrested for shooting his father. And so I was looking on Facebook, and everybody's on there, glad he's off the street, put that scumbag, yada, yada, yada. And in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, why did he shoot his dad? Like,
Right.
was he beating on him? Was he beating on his mom? Was he molesting his sister? It's not always just as clear and cut and simple as they try to paint it to be in the press. And that's the thing, is you hit it on the head. When you're in jail, that's making those people money. They don't want you to
Mhm.
get out. And then lots of times they hit you with the public defender, and they're just a glorified plea bargainer. And that's why these, DAs and these solicitors, their conviction percentages are through the roof, because people take the plea deals. It's not like
Mhm.
they're fighting every one of those damn cases and winning off the letter of the law. People
Yeah.
that, if somebody's staring down the barrel of 15 years and a public defender says, I can get you 10 or, 9 or whatever the case may be,
Yeah.
that's free years. That's years of freedom they're going to gain back. So why wouldn't they take it?
Mhm.
And if you don't have the legal recourse to secure a lawyer, lots of times that's what you're forced to do. You hear guys say, "Oh, well, if I didn't do it, I would never, say I did." Bullshit,
Yeah.
bullshit. If you were staring down the barrel of 10 years and you had no way to get a lawyer, and a public defender says, "Hey, I can get you 5," you'll say you did whatever the hell they want you to say.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah. And I'm one of them guys. Yeah, I was guilty. That's the other thing. Like I also know that from being in prison, man, there are dudes that belong in there.
oh yeah, yeah.
There
I
are
tell
some
everybody.
predators, man. I've met them. I've sat and ate dinner with them, man, and I might even have been one at a time. You know what I mean? So I get it, man. Like I'm not, abolished police. I'm not abolished prisons. It's just not realistic. I
We
mean,
just got
every
to make
country.
sure that the right people are going in there,
Yeah. I
and
mean,
people that deserve.
and it's people, a lot of people think defunding, like, I'm not even for defunding the police. Yo, let's fund them homicide divisions. Let's fund them rape divisions. Let's catch the bad guys, but stop funding the sitting, just looking for people to mess with, like, and to go through our cars. Like, it's just not what our founding fathers, like, I think about, like, I'm a big Ben Franklin fan, big Ben Franklin fan. Um, and I think about all these founding fathers, like, if they came back right now and said, how's everything? And we're like, well, we're kind of a superpower. It's kind of cool, and people really admire us in a way. Okay, how's that freedom and liberty? Well, we have 34% of the world's women's prison population, and we're only 4% of the world's population. We're 34% of the world. I want people to hear 34% of the world's women's prison population, but we're only 4% of the world population. What would our founding? Oh, yeah, that's definitely that liberty and freedom we left you. No, like this is, and again, it's back to police lobbyists and unions. I mean, it's really, really deep, and it's the way one of the main reasons why we can't federally legalize marijuana, because they know that they use that to search cars,
Mm-hmm.
and the fed and the big police unions have paid off our politicians to keep saying no to, I mean, think about it. How many domestic violence is there because of alcohol? But we're cool, I mean, you can go down the whole list of things with, and then you got marijuana, and because they've kept it as a punishment. Another story I'll tell you about God's work in this, what I think is God's work, is, we had prohibition in the 1920s, we get prohibition,
Mm-hmm.
and prohibition is we can't drink anymore, and then the big crime syndicates break out because everybody wants to drink, and this whole big thing happens in our country because of the 18th Amendment, which is the prohibition. So anyhow, um we decide only 12 years later, we're like, yo, this is bullshit. Like, this is not going where it's supposed to go. And so the people wanted to drink. The government seen they can make money off of it. And the other reason why we stopped the whole prohibition movement was because of police brutality. They were going in speakeasies and beating the shit out of people, man, and like taking it too far, taking it too far, and people got sick of it. And so then we have the 21st Amendment, which is the one. It's the only amendment that goes against another amendment. It's the only one. It's the 21st Amendment saying, "Yo, we can drink again." Only 2 years later, after that, only 2 years later, after we do this, uh, get prohibition lifted, Alcoholics Anonymous was founded. Only 2 years later, then Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, I'm not speaking I'm speaking just historical, this spiritual, historical stuff here, because at the time, man, they didn't. Alcoholism was so bad. They didn't. It still is, but they were doing lobotomies on alcoholics, and they had big hospitals that were, doing all types of treatments that they didn't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, here comes this program along that's like, yo, we kind of actually have a solution. You kind of have to, give yourself to God and, do a couple of these steps, whatever. I don't want to, but yo, that's a gift. And guess what? We spread that's only 100 years old. And that is now all around the world. It's free. And it's all around the world, helping millions and millions of human beings, like, come back to their families, come back to being parents, come back to being children again. Like, there's just millions of miracles because of this American thing, which was lifted because of prohibition, which was the oppression of the police off of us again. So we're good. We're a good country, man. We're good. We got some shit, man. So
Well, hopefully we can right this ship. One thing that you wrote a book. We mentioned earlier in the beginning of the show. I don't know if you have one handy, or you can tell us where they can find it.
yeah. So it's the autobiography of recovering skinhead. It's been out about 12 years now. It is being in the process of becoming a film now. So, but you can get it at Amazon. You can get it at my hawthornebooks.com, which is my publisher. You can get it there. But yeah, it's just my raw telling of my story, man. Just basically what you guys just heard, but just with some more details and this and that. And like I said, man, you're gonna read it and be like, this is crazy. But if you look in the back, man, we talk about how we fact checked everything, and tell you a quick story on how. So my writer, because I had a writer, because I'm from Philadelphia and a public school education, so my writing isn't that great. My spelling is horrendous because I can't sound anything out because of my Philly accent. How do you sound out the word water? Right? How do you sound water out? WOODY, or I mean ER, or what, So I don't know how to sound shit out because of my stupid accent from Philadelphia, which I love very much. Okay. But anyhow, this woman says she wants to write a book with me. We talked, and I said I wanted her to write a book with me, and she's finally agreed. And I'll tell you that there was this thing that happened on Oprah. That James Fry was a guy who wrote a book, A Million Little Pieces, went on Oprah, sold millions of copies. Then she found out he lied, brought him back on. He admitted to his lies. That had all just happened right when I'm about to write my book. And so my writer and the publishers were like, yo, we ain't gonna have no James Fry moments, are we? And I was like, nope. And one of the ways that my writer was going to believe me was that she had heard stories about me. I mean, everyone in the movement had heard some type of fucking story about me. I was, again, a wild, drunk, crazy man. But anyhow, she had heard the story about me breaking out of a mental hospital. And she was like, she's like, I don't believe that story. Like, it's just too crazy. The way it was told is just crazy. And so she wants to meet in Terre Haute, Indiana, and that's our first time where we're going to work together. I get into Terre Haute, she gets into Terre Haute. We said, let's go around. She goes, the reason why I started here is because you said that happened here, and I want to go find this hospital and see if it really happened. And we drove around for like a day, and we couldn't, like, we drove to every hospital, and I was like, that's not it. It doesn't look like it. I kind of remember some things, and we couldn't find it. And the reason why I was in there was because I attempted suicide, and the Terre Haute Police Department put me in there. So eventually she goes, oh, let's just go ask a cop. What hospital would they bring, And so we had a big light bulb moment. We went and asked the cop. He said, oh, we would have brought him to St. Catherine's. And now I knew the nickname of the place was Crazy Kate's. So when he said St. Catherine's, I was like, oh, I think that's it. So we go there. We go find out what we can find out. I was a juvenile at the time at this lockdown mental institution. And I did jump out the window, by the way. I mean, it was a crazy thing. So we go there, and my writer, we go into the lobby of this medical facility, and she's like, "Hey, I want to talk to someone about something that happened 15 years ago." This woman that was behind the counter said, "I've only been here 5 years, whatever." But Betsy, this like older woman, she's like, "Betsy's been here forever." So Jody and myself go over to Betsy and said, "Hey, do you remember an incident where a neo-Nazi jumped out of a window?" And she was like, "Oh my God." She's like, "Yes, we changed the whole hospital due to that." She's like, "There's no hospital, there's no patients' rooms on that side of the hospital anymore. They're all in the back now, and that's all doctors' offices. Like that whole thing changed our whole administration." Blah 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 blah. And then in the middle of it, she just looked at me and she was like, "You're him." And she recognized me, and it was crazy. And so my writer's like, "All right, I'm down. I believe I'm going to believe everything." So my book was also written with a lot of other people's perspective, and then we just wrote it to where it seems like it's all just from my perspective too. So
Okay, well, good. We'll put a link to that in our show notes so our listeners can go pick that up if they want. One question before we get out of here. Obviously, we talked about American History X. It was fabulously done, albeit, the creative aspect is kind of off the cuff of who exactly it may not have been about, but still a well acted movie, well played. If you had your choice right now, who is going to play Frank Meeink?
wow. Boy. So there'd have to be different stages, like a younger and an older.
Mm-hmm.
But we're kind of in a little bit of talks with the Wahlberg people. So just to be safe, in case you should hear this, I'm going to say Wahlberg, Mark Wahlberg.
There you go.
That's the safe one right now.
All right. I can dig that. Well, Frank, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on the show, man. I've had a fantastic time. The interview's been great. We wish you nothing but the best going forward and everything that you do. Much success to you, my brother. Keep preaching the word like you're doing. Is there any socials you want to shout out where people can go follow you on before we get out of here?
Yeah, just hit me up on Twitter, or Twitter's probably and Instagram. If anyone wants to follow up, and man, if anyone wants to ever talk about if you're having alcohol issues, whatever, man, I'm a great person to talk to about any of that stuff. So, don't have to be just about racist stuff. So
Right.
my thing's always open for that. So
Well, we appreciate your work in that field, man. You can never have enough people out there that's willing to sit and talk to people, because I think that's a lot of what it boils down to. When I do talk to a lot of guys that's been on the show and they share their stories, that's kind of a common denominator. As they say, at one point in time, they just felt like they had nobody to talk to. And unfortunately, sometimes we can be that person and don't even realize it because we get so caught up in the day to day. We might not get a chance to return text or return phone calls, and you never know what somebody's going through. So if you get a chance, regardless of how busy your day is, return some texts, return some phone calls, reach out to some people that might be, struggling or going through some things, and you never know what kind of a difference that can make.
yep, yep.
Well, Frank, my friend, I've had a great time having you on, man. It's been an absolute pleasure. 1,000 thank yous, buddy.
Thank you for letting me just talk, because I know I just talk.
Oh, it makes my job easier when they don't just talk.
Well, thank
Ladies
you,
and
man.
gentlemen, I'm Hollywood Wade. That was Frank Meeink. And unfortunately, we are out of time. Tune in next week for an all new episode of Crime and Entertainment. Frank, appreciate it, my friend.
Thank you, my brother.